right, Farah, welcome to the show. I'm delighted to have you here. We got here in the end.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Um, like I ask everybody who comes on the show, I prefer my guests to introduce themselves. Who better to speak about themselves than the person themselves? So, would you mind telling us a bit about yourself, Farah, who you are, what you do, and most importantly, how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, my name's Farrah Scott. I'm the CEO for Trapper Sushi Co. I started with this business 11 and a half years ago as a server, and I've worked my way up into the CEO role as of January 2024. This has been an amazing experience. Probably the highlight of my life is working in this company and the accelerated growth I've had. And I'm working towards continuing that for other individuals in our company and within the restaurant industry as a whole.
That's awesome. And that's actually a great jumping off point because one of the things I ask people is about like identifying talent in hospitality. And I mean, you were like fast tracked. I mean, I don't know anybody who's had such a meteoric rise so quickly as you, like from server to CEO in as many years. When it comes to like, what did people see in you that like helped you accelerate, do you think?
It's hard to say exactly. The feedback that I mostly have gotten throughout the career that I've had here is just that, I'm an extremely hard worker. It's something that I pride myself on. Any issue that there is at hand, I'm very solution orientated, so I want to figure it out. I don't come with problems, come with solutions, and all those, cliche, slogans that I could spit out. But I think ultimately, passion behind what I'm doing and leading by example with that hard work ethic, with learning the knowledge that I need to learn and all operating positions for the business has really set me apart in this business. And it's also facilitated others to do so as well, which is very exciting. We very much so look for internal talent here at Trappers. We have a program called the Wingfield program that's conducive to that elevates, hourly employees like what I did myself into
Yeah.
these higher level management positions. So it's definitely a culture here at Trappers. It's very important to us. It's what we're all about. My boss, the owner of the business, Trapper O'Keefe, his purpose for having businesses is to provide ordinary people with an extraordinary opportunity. And we're definitely doing that consistently. My story is a huge testament to that. So that's a big part of our organization is finding internal talent and, in creating a work environment so we can develop and grow individuals into great leaders.
That's amazing. I talk about that a lot actually on the podcast, which is like, identifying talent and creating career pathways for them, especially for hourly workers. Do you think that a sort of pendulum has shifted in hospitality with more focus on that in general? Or would you say it's quite unique to you guys at Trapper?
I believe that it has been a shift in hospitality in general. I think when I think back to, 7, 8 years ago, I had a part-time serving job at a very corporate restaurant, and I was working there part-time as well as assistant managing at Trapper Sushi Bremerton. So this was, I guess, 10 years ago. And at that specific restaurant, they would hire in external candidates for management. And I noticed that, the training process that they would put them through and everything start to finish was very clean. It was very organized. This is a very high level corporate restaurant that I worked at just at a
Yep.
certain level. And I noticed those things and coming from management, working part-time. But there was something with the internal candidates that they just set them apart from those managers that had come in from the outside, hadn't worked their way up in the ranks. And that was at the store level. And it really showed me something when I was still at that store management level myself as well at a different business. I was just there trying to make holiday cash. I was 23 at
Yep.
the time.
Yeah.
So serving, obviously it's a good thing to go back to if you need some quick cash.
Yep.
But yeah, I just was like, it kind of stood out. And when I left that part-time job and I ended up accelerating my career with Trappers after that, into general management. I was a general manager for a year, and then I moved up into a corporate position, directing management, training, and development. And that experience at that corporate restaurant, it showed something to me that internal candidates are so valuable for leadership positions if they meet the qualifications. You can if they're if they know the culture, if they love the place that they work at, they're an hourly employee, they're showing up every single day, they're dependable, they're just your brand is just, coming out of them, they love the culture.
Yeah.
It's not give that person an opportunity than hiring somebody from the outside that may have that leadership experience, but they don't have that experience with the business. And I think it does work out both ways. We still hire out external candidates for management,
Yeah.
but I feel, that specific business I worked for, it was very like, it was their process to just hire from the outside for general managers. And it really stood out to me because I saw some of these internal people that were waiting for their shot. There was a server that had trained me, and she had been there for 10 years, and she was their lead server, and she trained me, and she knew more than my general manager knew about the
Yeah.
business, how to treat customers, the care that she had for her customers. And in my mind, I was like, why wouldn't you ever want to excel your career? Well, I do, but they don't really, put it out there for internal candidates and stuff. And so it really stood out to me. And I think it has taken a shift, not just at Trappers, but I've seen it at other restaurants now, talking to other individuals, maybe not at the bigger, scale that restaurant was at, but at the level that we're at Trappers. We have 15 units now. We just opened a Surprise, Arizona location 3 days ago. But, and
Surprise.
yeah.
We'll talk about that. Finish your thought. We'll talk about that.
Yeah, but that's still so important to us. The individual that opened the Surprise location, her name's Mariah Wingfield. I named the Wingfield program after her because she went from host to a regional manager with us within 5 years, and she cares more about the business than anybody that I could find out on this, out on the street and say, hey, come work for me as a general manager of the store in Arizona and help build that market for us. So I think it is an industry shift as a whole. It really pertains to Trapper Sushi Co. But I'm starting to notice more and more of that happening. The Washington Hospitality Association that we're a part of, I'm on their HR committee. We have our first meeting next week, and it's about facilitating that growth within the industry, not just at singular restaurants. And so they're even looking at putting programs on their website for people that maybe don't know what they want to do with their careers. And they're putting these job descriptions out there, like, just for basic level things, bartender, server, and this is what it could turn into. And that's a hospitality association doing that, just for industry as a whole. So I think it is catching on. And I, it's something that we're definitely continuing here at Trappers and working really hard towards.
Why do you think that's happening? Like, what do you think has been the impetus for a better focus on career opportunity for hourly workers within hospitality?
I think a big thing is, and like I said, from what I said from my experience, I think, having somebody take on a leadership role that already knows the brand, has worked an hourly role or maybe an entry level role, learning that and seeing that progression and letting them take on more responsibility and kind of like a more tiered up, situation than just kind of handing it over to an external candidate. But I also think, and in this sort of wasn't the first priority with that, but it also creates more employee engagement and buy into the business, even as an hourly employee. So when we orientate people now into our business, we let them know about the program that we have here, the Wingfield program that facilitates internal growth. And, we've seen dishwashers and cooks and servers come on board and they're like, oh my gosh, and I can join this program. And we're like, yeah, you're here with us for 90 days. You meet these requirements. You can get into this leadership program and you can sit in, these leadership seminars that I host every 6 months with other leaders of the company, the corporate team. And you can feel like you're a part of something and a part of the company's growth. And I think that's the big part that I didn't really see when I had that experience at that other restaurant, that if those employees that were great, that lead server that trained me knew that she may have had an opportunity in the future, that could have even just elevated her as a server even more, because it's like, I'm working towards this with this business. I'm not here to just, clock in, clock out, get my paycheck and wait for the next opportunity somewhere else. I'm here and I'm getting an opportunity here. And I think that's huge. And I think now the shift is that it creates more employee engagement within your business, more buy into the culture that you're trying to, present to your customers, your clientele. And it's a big deal. And it's very important, I think, generationally now for restaurants to have that employee engagement, making employees, even if they're at an entry-level position, have a purpose to come to work to every day. I feel like that's a very, very important thing to this current generation in the workforce for restaurants.
Yeah, totally. I definitely the reason why I'm probing, it's like I'm like, tell me why.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I mean I've done probably like 90 plus episodes of this podcast now, and I feel like lots of execs are very much like leaning in and emphasizing sort of training and career pathing leadership roles as a sort of key benefit for attracting and a key benefit for retaining staff. Like I feel part of me almost thinks I think there's like almost like a reaction to how difficult it is to hire really good people in hospitality now. I think that's like sort of like the nub or the kind of crux of like a lot of this issue. I think like post COVID, for example, like I mean, kind of changed the makeup of how we even think about hourly workers within hospitality. I mean, there's been a revolution in technology, revolution in sort of roles and demands of certain workers within hospitality. And with that, then obviously a lot of people just not coming back to hospitality uh, from COVID. You have this sort of like perfect storm. When it comes, you mentioned that you were like on the HR board of the Washington Hospitality Association. What's the general vibe up there in terms of like recruitment for hourly workers even?
So I haven't attended. I just started attending those meetings late last year when I was the COO, and the HR committee is a new thing that they put together year moving forward for this reason exactly, for industry, restaurant worker development, and how to push that. And the vibe, I guess I would say from that is that they're trying to help us attract more those employees that want those opportunities to help with retention and help with employee engagement and to help with our brand consistently being presented to our clientele. I think I'm not sure the idea behind it as to why they started it. I was in a really short meeting in October with them, and they had just mentioned it. And I said, well, I have a program similar to this, but within our organization. And they said, okay, well, can you attend these meetings? So I have the first one next week where they're trying to dial in some just basic things. Yeah. But I think the vibe from them is, and I'm not sure. I mean, I'm sure if I called the CEO, he would tell me why they're doing it. But the vibe that I got from that meeting is to attract better talent within the restaurant industry. Yeah. Like you said, what happened after COVID, a lot of people just didn't come back. They found other avenues to make money during that time. They went different career paths. They took that time, all the stimulus and things like that to invest in other, career paths for themselves, which is great. But yeah, the industry, the restaurant industry we were still operating during that time, but very scaled back, right? We were, faced up back and forth, especially up here in Washington. And, our applicant pool is just completely drained itself, and we just had to re-pull individuals back in. So I think, the association that we're a part of recognized that too. And listening to the other operators in the area also were experiencing that. It's just really hard to find those good people. And I think, this all kind of goes together with, providing those opportunities and making sure that your entry-level workers and candidates that come in for interviews with you know that there's an opportunity there. I think traditionally as well, when I started in the restaurant industry years ago, that it was just kind of a job to have to just pass the time until you figure out what you want to do with your life. And to hear a story like mine for somebody that's a server right now, even me coming into my office, it's in the back of one of our restaurants in Federal Way in the front, and I'll have new servers come to me, and they're like, oh, that's that's the CEO now, or even when I was the COO. And if I overhear it, I'm like, yeah, I was you 11 years ago. I was serving tables. It was my first serving job. And they're like, what the heck? And some of their faces could care less. And some of them are like, how did she do that? They go to their GM and how did she do that? So I think the Washington Hospitality Association recognizes things like that too, within that are struggles of the industry. And some of the restaurants that are smaller than ours that haven't started facilitating that yet. And they're really trying to push, you can make a career out of a restaurant job, essentially. So
I do it's so refreshing to hear it. I think like I feel like there's a momentum behind making training a very obvious and leadership career, not just like a fling of a job, so to speak, that there's like a career opportunity for people here that you can really progressed. I mean, to your point, it's so funny to hear that anecdote where people are like, "Oh my God, you're the CEO," and you're like, "Yeah, just like you." That it must be kind of like humbling, but also kind of in your head, you're like, "Yeah, you can do it." Like, as in, I can see why they picked you as like the CEO for that message alone. You know what I mean? Like, in the sense that like it can be done and how it inspires everybody else in the organization. When you were talking about the is it Wingfield? Is that her name? The Wingfield program, like, was that like that initiative is yours? Like, that has been sort of, and you've like designed that. Like, how many people? Like, you've got 15 locations plus one now. You said the pop up in Arizona, so there's like 15 people. Does that mean what? There's about 300 people working for you guys, or how?
So our employee count is about 680 right now, 680 people.
680. And so, like, have you had a big kind of response? Like, when I say a big response, because numbers are relative, I guess the question I'm asking is, how do you feel about the response to the program internally? Like, the demand for it? Has there been a sort of clamoring, or are you kind of restricting who can kind of get in? Do you have to qualify, or like, how does the program kind of work?
Yes. So the first meeting we had, and I have pictures of it. I posted it in the last meeting because it's cool to see. So the first meeting I had was June in 2024. It's a leadership like workshop. I had about 25 people there.
Wow.
The last meeting I had to split into two because we had 77 people.
Wow.
Yes. So and things happen. People leave the business that are in that program still, just like anything else. Things happen.
Yeah.
But it's in our culture now, that program. So you'll hear it's in our orientations. You'll hear people talk about it in the restaurants. Almost every single one of the GMs in the company is enrolled in that program. Almost every single supervisory level, key holder. And then we have, hourlies in that program as well. And we've probably made roughly, since the program started, I mean, I'd have to check, but I'd have to say at least 30 internal promotions in the last 2 years from that program, where we've taken somebody from an hourly role or a mid-level supervisor, and they're now in management. So it's definitely shown promise, and it's helped us as well, because we're not scrambling. We have these group of leaders that if something happens, we have these people to rely on. And it's kind of cute because I call them my Mo's, and that's what I called Mariah. She was when I was a regional manager with this business, she was my go-to, and she ran our Puyallup location, which is, since she ran that location, has been our most profitable, best, highest revenue location that we have. And she really turned that location around for me when I was a regional. And I was always like, somebody was like, I have a trainee, we're bringing on a trainee. I'm like, send them to Mo. That's Mo.
Yeah.
Mo can do it for me. So I call these people my Mo's, and that's the cool thing that we've cultivated, is now when I need somebody to call on, now I have 70 Mo's in the company that I know buy into our culture. They want to move up. They want to work hard. They want to help. They want to do anything that they can to grow with this business. And it was a missing piece that we had for a long time. And once we just put a name on it and identified it, there was such a huge response to it. I can't even tell you how surprised and amazed I am of how much that took off in our business.
Yeah. It's awesome, because one of the things I hear a lot about from people is like building a bench for like GMs and GMs into sort of director, like on the floor kind of roles, and more administrative kind of leadership roles. And there's like a dearth across the board. And it's amazing to hear you articulate a program that has a clearly material impact, because like, and this is something I think about a lot, and it's not just a restaurant thing. Like, it's like, I think, a business thing. We talk a lot about culture, but how do we show the material impact of culture initiatives on people's businesses? You don't see culture as a line item on a P&L, and so it's like, how do people look at it, like, and actually measure the impact? And you're able to say to me very clearly, like, we've had 30 plus people literally come through this program into management positions. Even if you had to account for like getting a recruiter to literally go find you an external, like, director, area director, or GM, like, what's the cost, and what's the cost to your business not having those people? Like, I think that's what makes, first of all, that makes this podcast so helpful, because I guess somebody hears that and they go, yes, please, ding, 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 light bulb. Like, we need to invest in our people, which again sounds so obvious. Like, you think about it, like you hear yourself say this stuff, and you're like, oh, like, best for people. Like, of course,
Yeah.
like what?
Yeah.
But then it's like people have no problem getting some data, customer data platform and spending 250 grand on it.
Yes.
And barely anyone in the company realizes how to take
Yeah.
advantage of it. And then you're like,
Yeah.
it's a couple of grand to train people. Like we get some online courses, we design a program,
Mhm.
we do meetups, we like in person,
Yes.
online, and you can probably cost that out not at 250 grand like you would for a CDP. And I think that's a kind of misalignment that exists not just in like hospitality, but I think in general. But I think what separates good from great in hospitality is the focus on people. And I
Mhm.
do think, to your credit, Farah, as well, that like what like the kind of lifers, so to speak, like you've been through the whole thing. You know what I mean? You've seen the
Yeah.
steps and you've kind of made the pathway. And you kind of, whatever the phrase is, like you've tore down those trees so other people can walk right through them.
Yeah.
And whatever the phrase is. And it's amazing. And it actually leads into a very interesting topic I have, which is because it's Women's Leadership Month period time, whatever the phrase is,
Mhm.
like we're in this period of time. And I'm curious because you're very much smack bang in that. Like, I mean, in terms of like hospitality, I think there's only so many people that even exist like you that have come up from server to being CEO,
Yeah.
being a female leader in a very sort of, I don't know what's the phrase, white bread industry, white old man industry, you know what I mean, typically. And I'm
Mhm.
curious, just like your take on sort of like women in leadership within hospitality,
You know, it's a
without putting you on
strange
the spot too much.
it's a strange thing, and I'm just being completely honest here, is I don't really
Yeah,
think about it that much. And I think
yeah,
that it is I love seeing women leaders. I love seeing any leaders though that come through and have a story similar to mine. Um, and I never thought in my life that I would be a CEO of a company, based off of where I came from, my upbringing, how hard I had to work. I thought that the ceiling would have stopped at maybe a general manager, or as I moved up as a
yeah,
director, or even COO, right? And then now I'm the CEO. And I think, the people ask me a lot about the woman aspect of it naturally, I think, because like you said, right now we're, women's leadership stuff is going on. And also because my story is so unique and it does inspire a lot of women. And, you know, it's hard because I just don't identify it with anything. It's just all about hard work. And there has been people in my journey that have definitely treated me different, not only because I'm a woman, but because of my age, because of my experience, because of this, because of that. There's always going to be barriers in your way. And I think when you have the mindset to not sell yourself short up front because of those known barriers that may be socially out there, I think that's what
yeah,
kind of sets you apart and breaks that mentality through. Because I'm being honest with you. I have never once had a thought in my mind of saying, oh, maybe I won't get this opportunity because I'm a woman, or maybe this is impossible
yeah,
because I've never thought that. And I'm blessed to have not had those feelings because I know that they're very real. And I know that in some cases that may affect opportunities for people, and profiling happens without even knowing, subconsciously. So I definitely in my journey feel like that I've gone through a lot of adversity for that and a lot of other reasons too. And I think that if you don't put those barriers in your own mind, and you don't get yourself sucked into things like that, you're going to make it regardless of what obstacle is in your way. You're going to make it. And that's the thing. If you're constantly kind of thinking about the social acceptance, or this industry is male dominated, or I'm 33 years old, right, and that's going to be in my way,
nice.
then it's going to be in my way, right?
Yeah,
That's going to be in my way because I am constantly thinking about it. And people pick up on that's confidence is a big factor into
yeah,
elevating careers, elevating your personal life. And I just when I see women in leadership positions, I'm like, yes, heck yeah, this is awesome.
yeah,
Yes. And I feel like we can kind of relate, but it doesn't really take a huge precedence when I see, are my male leaders in this business too, working their way up. It's the same feeling I get, that I'm like, yes, like we're restaurant workers, we're the grunt workers, and we did this, And so just, that's kind of the comment I have on that. It's, the more barriers
Yeah.
that you acknowledge, sometimes it kind of is a detriment to you. And it's not that I ignore it or that I'm oblivious to it, because I know it's there. I know there's still locker room talk that goes on amongst them, and it doesn't, I can hold my own in those situations,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
I've done a great job doing it. And so I just don't feel like that's been a barrier for me. And and to women that have had that as barriers, because I know that everybody has a different experience, I do feel for that. And I feel for anybody as an individual that has had a hard time just because of something of their, orientation, nature, anything like that. And fortunately, I know that in my mind, if I keep my head on straight, all that stuff is kind of like blurred, and it might be going around me, but I'm like, don't even see it. So yeah.
Totally. I mean, and I appreciate you being so candid about that. I think you have a very innate kind of confidence, and I can feel it like emanating from you, which,
Oh,
confidence is just the greatest thing you possibly could have in any walk of life, being able to feel like walking into a room that you can be confident. And I think a lot of it kind of stems from having that inside of yourself, like being able to go in and put yourself in a position and not being afraid to fail, and kind of getting back up and dusting yourself off, going again and again and again and again. And I think confidence begets confidence, so to speak. And I definitely get that from you.
thank you. I have my moments, I have moments of weakness too. Everybody does. And
Yeah.
I am not perfect by any means. There's obstacles I've gone through, and everybody has, but just getting past those, and like I said, but as the, just come back to the women leadership comment. When I see a woman leader, don't get me wrong, I am so proud, and I'm like, yes, girl, like you get it,
Yeah.
be that person, be that leader. But I have those feelings about, I mean, everybody that's worked their way up and worked hard and had to go through a lot of adversity, and because everybody does in their own way.
Yeah.
Nobody's, and so it's got to be hard, no matter what and who you are.
I mean, that's why I like the kind of style of this pod, because I can, I don't need to ask you guys very specific questions about like, tell me about revenue, tell me about hiring, tell me about retention. It's like,
Yes.
no, like that's why I like to hear people's stories and their take on it, because I think the philosophy is what matters here, and I appreciate you being so kind of like candid about that. I think it's unique. You're just in an incredibly unique position, and I mean, I've spoken to many leaders in hospitality over the last, what, I've been doing this probably properly now for the last 4 months, I'd say, since November. And I think like what separates a lot of people in hospitality as well. And I think speaks so much to, the program that you have, your attitude and your own position, which is that like, innately understanding hospitality really comes from experience on the floor,
Yes.
and being in the restaurant floor and
Yes.
getting it, because I think like, what separates people in hospitality is like intangible behaviors like passion and, effort and hard work,
Mm-hmm.
whatever way we
Yes.
want to measure what those are. They're like intangible versus like, can somebody use a POS? Yes or no? You know what I mean? It's
Exactly.
like there's
Yes.
there's like a difference. But like when you kind of come up those ranks, you've been there, you get it, and there's a different type of empathy that exists in the type of leaders, and you most certainly fall into that. And I feel like the people I've met in this pod, which have been a lot of people like you in various stages of their careers, I guess you're also quite prodigious in the sense that you're 33 years old, you're the CEO. This
Yes.
is actually incredible. I mean, like, yeah,
Yeah.
I've had a lot of older guys in this podcast.
Yes, I
That are
understand.
in different positions. But it's amazing. And I mean, I guess like, what advice do you want to give to like, if hourly workers were listening to this, like if your staff were hearing this podcast, because I
Mhm.
mean, they would be mesmerized already hearing what we've heard, but like, what advice would you give them if they hear this? If you want to share this with them?
Yeah, I think kind of going back to what I just said, the last question is just kind of ignore what's in your way, because you focus on that so much, it's gonna consume you, and it's gonna be very difficult to break past that barrier. And that goes for anything. And I think in life is, if you're fixated on why you can't do something, you're not going to do it. You need to focus on why you can and you should. And I think, the basics, aside from that, the basics, work hard, be dependable, learn, be an open book, be okay to change. A lot of those things that I see hinders growth in individuals that I've come in contact with, because, they're scared of change. They're scared
Yeah.
to work harder than maybe what they feel that they're compensated for. But I've always said, if you act the position that you want, you will get that position. But if you expect to get that recognition and that compensation before you, it's not going to happen. Rarely does that happen. Opportunities don't just fall in your lap. You have to create them. And so focusing on why you can and why you should do something instead of the barriers that you have in your way, I think is the most important advice that I could give somebody, because there's always going to be reasons why you can't do it. There's always going to be reasons that you could think of why you're not going to get that promotion and how many people are ahead of you to get it. It doesn't matter. If you do what you're supposed to do, if you work hard, if you're open to change, you're going to get there. And maybe it's not the way that you thought. I never thought I was going to be a CEO. That wasn't my goal when I started serving tables at Trapper
Yep.
Sushi. My goal was to make money and to move up so I could make a better wage at that time. And I started doing that. And then my purpose changed. And I said, okay, I want to start help developing people within this organization so this business runs smoother. And then my purpose changed again. I want to create development programs for people in this company. I want to improve operations. I mean, it evolved as I went. So even if the purpose is so small and that's where you start, it's still valuable to the journey, and you have to do the work. You cannot expect an opportunity to just fall in your lap. And I guess that's, my short, long answer for that. But that's the advice that I give. And that's what I would give anybody in this industry that's wanting to make a career out of it.
It's very interesting. You just triggered something, and I've mentioned this a few times on the pod, but my old boss, she amazing person, and she was very early in Facebook, and she wrote this article about the concept of giving away your Legos and other startup commandments, and basically saying, like, what I hired you today for is XYZ job spec. That's not going to be the same job that I expect you to do in 6 or 12 months or 18 months, because if we're growing, the business is going to evolve and you're going to need to evolve with it. She talks about an anecdote of basically like being asked to set up HR at that company. And it's like, I don't know anything about HR. I'm like in my 20s. And it's like, neither did Zuckerberg. So it's like, just go do it. I trust you. But empowering people, but the concept of like this type of professional flexibility per the job spec is like, I hired you for that today, but this will evolve and you will change. And like, if you want to grow, the opportunity is there for you to grow into it. I think about that a lot, just in terms of like how people think about, sending a message as to why to work in a company. Like we all talk about, like you will hear, like everyone wants opportunity and whatever. It's like, I can provide it for you if you're willing to be flexible. If you're willing to put in the graft, like the role will be yours. Just you can have it. I'm not like, you know what I mean? I think about this a lot. And it sounds very similar to kind of what you're saying there.
Yes. Yeah. And that's spot on. You hit it right on the head. And that's what our program is within our organization, the Wingfield program. It's rolled out in front of you day one of hire, and this all could be yours, but you have to work for it. And we have it, and it's real. And these are the people, these are the testimonials of the CEO in the company of Mariah Wingfield, who's now a employee-owned partner with Trapper, the location that opened 3 days ago. She opened a restaurant with my boss. And it's real stories, real people. They didn't get a handout. None of us got handouts. We worked within the organization, and the organization provided the opportunity. So you hit it on the head there with, it's yes, the opportunity is there, but you have to actually want it.
Like
and
staring you in the face.
Yes. And it's hard, but it's, the more we can prove that, I think as an industry as a whole, I think the more engagement that we'll get. And I think that's what it's all about, is getting those quality people, getting those great people that want to absorb the brand, be the brand. And, obviously the biggest goal here for a profit organization is to bring in customers, because that's how we all have jobs. And it really reflects that on the guest experience when you have those people bought in, engaged, and wanting that opportunity, because they're going to represent your brand so well, versus, somebody that may be passing through or isn't really loving their job and knows there's no opportunity. They're just here for the grind and clock in, clock out. So it all goes together. This this kind of industry shift that's happening, and it's very smart of businesses to kind of recognize that and start, you know,
Okay.
promoting from within. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Farrah, like, I mean, look at the time. I mean,
Yeah.
we've absolutely crushed this. Thanks so much for coming on. I
Yeah,
really, really
thank you for
appreciate it. You've
having
been
me.
phenomenal.
Oh, thank you.